Good evening. I'm Heather Hiscox, and this is The National.
We find it disappointing and insulting, quite frankly.
The backlash grows after the Governor General derides junk science, horoscopes, and divine intervention. You had lots of questions for Bowe Bergdahl about climate change. Tonight, you'll get his answers.
This is a ticking time bomb that really worries me a lot.
About 500,000 Canadians are affected by hepatitis C. There is a cure, but it's out of reach for most. Plus,
it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see this piece.
The old master that's expected to hit a new high for a painting sold at auction. The Governor General is the Queen's representative in Canada, the position steeped in tradition and ceremony and requiring plenty of diplomacy. Tonight, Julie Payette is under fire for wading into tricky territory during a speech this week. For some, it appeared she was mocking people who believe in God. Katie Simpson reports.
God save the Queen.
Julie Payette's dedication to science helped propel her to high office, but her comments about those who look to a higher power are causing divisions in Canada's religious communities.
We find it disappointing and insulting, quite frankly.
Frustration has been growing since the Governor General spoke at a science conference on Wednesday. Payette used her appearance to denounce climate change deniers and also took on creationists.
We are still debating and still questioning whether life was a divine intervention or whether it was coming out of a natural process, let alone, oh my goodness, lo and behold, random process.
We are a government grounded in science.
The Prime Minister defended Payette and her faith in science.
I applaud the firmness with which she stands in support of science and the truth.
But Justin Trudeau's comments have triggered new backlash today. On Facebook, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer wrote, "It is extremely disappointing that the Prime Minister will not support Indigenous peoples, Muslims, Jews, Sikhs, Christians, and other faith groups who believe there is truth in their religion." Trudeau's office says he stands by his statement, but some spiritual leaders suggest this debate is exposing a dismissive attitude in Canada that exists towards those who are religious.
That's alienating her audience, and in her goal of trying to promote awareness of climate change, it's actually counterproductive.
Payette has only been on the job about a month, and while her role is mostly ceremonial, she does represent the Queen, who is also the head of the Church of England. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa.
Environment Minister Catherine McKenna confronted a reporter from Rebel Media during a news conference today. The reporter tried to ask a question about hydroelectric power. McKenna answered with a demand the media organization stop referring to her as Climate Barbie.
Can I get a commitment from you that you will not use that hashtag and not use that name in your articles?
Well, me personally, yes, but I don't have editorial control over others. But if you want to get into it right now, you actually banned one of our correspondents from going to the upcoming conference in Bonn. So how
that is not true. In fact, I wrote a letter last year encouraging you to come because I think that you can all learn about climate change, how it's real and it's having real impacts.
I have a legitimate question about hydroelectricity's role.
I just would like a commitment that you will not call me names, that you won't talk about the color of my hair, that you won't make fun of me, and the reason I'm asking you not to do this is because I have 2 daughters, that there are lots of girls that want to get into politics, and it is completely unacceptable that you do this.
The exchange happened after a meeting of Canadian environment ministers in Vancouver. Hiring prospects in British Columbia got a big lift today, with Amazon announcing plans to bring 1,000 new jobs to the province. It comes on the same day as the latest employment numbers. The Canadian economy added more than twice the expected numbers of new jobs last month. Jacqueline Hansen reports.
Again, I thank you so very much for being patient with us.
A long line of job seekers snakes through a mall, waiting hours to apply for positions at an Amazon fulfillment center over the holidays.
Right now I'm not working, so I'm looking for a job.
Unemployed for 2 months already, Annie Aditala hopes today's wait will be worth it.
Though it's seasonal, they say like later it might become permanent. So yeah, I'm hoping I'll get hired.
If the current trend continues, she could be in luck. The economy added more than 35,000 jobs in October, driven by full-time positions. It marks 11 straight months of gains. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate ticked up to 6.3% because more people are looking for work.
Well, part of it is the recovery from the oil shock. Again, the resource sector is no longer a big drag, but we're also starting to see the manufacturing sector pick up.
Wages also saw strong growth, a good sign for Canadians' pocketbooks and for the economy as a whole.
Since the recession in 2009, we've had really slow wage growth. There was a little bit of wage growth in the 2000s before the recession, but really for the past, 20 years or so, we haven't had great wage growth.
But Canada's economy started this year so strong that it has been widely expected to slow down. And in some ways, it already is slowing. GDP contracted in August, and another report out today shows exports continue to fall.
And with NAFTA risks also looming, we have to take some of the numbers that we're getting with a grain of salt because the numbers ahead might not be so rosy.
Back at the job fair, Adi Tala got some good news.
Yeah, they called me for next interview tomorrow, 9:30. Yeah, I hope I will get through it.
And be one of those Canadians to find work while the opportunities are there. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's Ethics Commissioner has cleared up the confusion about the number of Liberal cabinet ministers still holding assets outside a blind trust. Mary Dawson now says that aside from Bill Morneau, there are none. Dawson's office had said fewer than 5 Liberal cabinet ministers currently hold controlled assets indirectly. That led to heated debate between the government and the opposition over Liberal MPs' assets and potential conflicts of interest. Morneau has since committed to putting his assets in a blind trust. For the first time today, the federal government used the Magnitsky Act, its new legal weapon against corruption and human rights abuses. Ottawa slapped sanctions on 52 foreign officials, including 30 Russians. Moscow promised to counter with sanctions on high-profile Canadians. Ontario is plowing ahead with its marijuana retail strategy ahead of legalization set for next Canada Day. Today, its Liquor Control Board announced the city's pre-selected for standalone cannabis stores. But there is growing pressure on the Trudeau government to slow all this down. It's coming from the opposition, from law enforcement, even from the Red Chamber. Catherine Cullen explains.
Prime Minister, several senators are saying they don't think they can meet your deadline for legalizing pot, getting the legislation.
Justin Trudeau's government has marched with determination towards pot legalization by July 1st, despite concerns from some provinces.
We need an additional year. I think that there are too many unaddressed issues.
And police forces.
We got a chance to do it right here. We're just asking for a bit of time, and then we'll do that.
But a legal, regulated pot regime by next Canada Day remains the Liberals' goal, though those pot plans could be challenged by an increasingly independent Senate.
It's going to take some time to study the bill in a deliberate, thoughtful manner.
Andre Pratt says there is serious concern about legalization in the Senate, including about policing and letting people grow marijuana at home. Many things that will require careful study and potentially suggesting changes to the bill, a process that may or may not be done by July.
The deadline is a political deadline. It's not a court that imposed that deadline, it's the government that set that deadline.
He's not alone.
I don't think we should set a timeline for legislation like this ever.
Vern White points to sensitive issues like age of access.
If this is really about keeping it away from young people, then we should be talking about an age beyond 18 or 19.
I understand the complexity and the importance of the work that the Senate has to do.
To encourage the Senate along, Bill Blair is leaning on a moral argument, telling senators a regulated system is needed to get young people away from pot.
I would simply remind them that the urgency of getting this work done is based on what's currently happening to our kids in our communities today, and that the price of delay is unacceptable.
The question is how many in the increasingly independent Senate will accept that argument. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada is committed to eliminating hepatitis C by 2030, except New data released at the World Hepatitis Summit in Brazil this week shows that's not going to happen. There is a cure for Hep C, but as Vicodopia tells us, the high cost of treatment is a major barrier to defeating the disease.
When Marcia Lecoeur was first diagnosed with hepatitis C, she was told she'd likely need a liver transplant. But then a new class of breakthrough drugs changed everything.
People that have had hepatitis C for many years are feeling more hope.
Hope came at a steep price, more than $100,000 for the treatment.
I had an excellent drug plan, and the drug plan covered the cost of the treatment. I paid, I think, maybe $10, $15 out of pocket every month, which is really nothing.
The price has fallen a bit for the newest version, but not everyone can afford the new 12-week treatment, which can still be as high as $80,000. If patients don't have their own drug coverage, governments usually only pay for the sickest, so many go untreated.
We are not on the road to elimination of hepatitis C. It's not enough.
Many countries, including Canada, aim to eliminate Hep C by 2030. Countries in green are on track. Those in red are falling behind. Canada is among nations making progress, but will likely miss the goal. This UK pharmacologist says the cost of drugs is holding up progress.
People are not getting the treatments they need. Governments are saying this is too expensive and they're not treating everybody. There are all sorts of restrictions on access to treatment. So something's got to change. The prices have to come down.
Experts estimate the drug should not cost more than $60 a patient, but the problem may not be price alone.
If this was an infection that affected an upper middle class wealthy population, I don't think we would be having this discussion.
This liver specialist says Canada screens for the disease inconsistently. He suspects it's because Hep C is often associated only with sharing needles or unsafe sex. But baby boomers are also at risk because of tainted blood transfusions. Still, Health Canada has rejected calls for mass screening.
The U.S. has developed excellent public health policy towards hepatitis C, and they're actually on target for eliminating hepatitis C in the U.S. by 2030, which is the WHO global target, and it's disappointing to see Canada falling short of that.
Feld says unless there's a national strategy, infections will simply continue. Vicodopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, ask Bob what you wanted to know about climate change.
That's a hard question to answer.
But it didn't have him stumped. And later, there goes the neighborhood.
We opened and people protested pretty strongly.
The battle against gentrifying parts of Los Angeles. The mayor of Montreal was supposed to be a shoo-in for re-election this Sunday, but Denis Coderre is in for a fight. His main rival is a relatively new name to politics who wants to shake things up. Alison Northcott has the story.
Bonjour, ça va bien?
Valerie Plante started this campaign as the underdog, a one-term city councillor with little political experience.
Good morning, Valerie.
Now, polls suggest she's in a tight race with Denis Coderre, who's been mayor for 4 years, today selling her message on the Montreal Metro.
Finding solution for people stuck in traffic, finding solution for people that are not being able to get into a bus or the subway because it's overcrowded. So this is my goal, and I've been very transparent and clear about my objective if I become the first woman mayor of the city. So to me, everything is possible.
But some of her key proposals, including a plan to build a new metro line, have been called unrealistic. Still, she says her plans and leadership style resonate with voters.
People are looking for politicians that are more connected to them.
Did you make an error and underestimate her?
Never underestimate. It's my 11th campaign.
Coderre, a former federal MP, is campaigning on his decades of political experience and his record.
We have a tremendous momentum. Economically, it's going really, really well. The thing back 4 years ago when we had all that corruption and now that we brought back integrity. So I think that at the end of the day, people will see that if it ain't broke, why fix it?
Coderre was elected following years of corruption scandals at City Hall. One of his first moves was to name an inspector general to monitor public contracts in an effort to clean things up. His opposition of the Energy East pipeline and Canada Post plans to end home mail delivery won him points with some. But he's been criticized for big spending on events like Montreal's 375th anniversary and the Formula E electric car race last summer. Nicknamed Kid Kodak for his affection for the cameras, Coderre's brash personality.
La bullshit, c'est assez, là.
doesn't sit well with everyone.
The personality of Coderre compared to Valérie Plante, it's bad, I think. It's not like a man that I will invite to dinner at my home.
But others say Coderre put Montreal back on the map.
The young lady, she's very young and no experience.
The choice is now up to Montrealers who go to the polls on Sunday. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
London is a city on edge again after more acid attacks, the latest carried out by a 14-year-old. It's become a major worry with gruesome consequences. Margaret Evans reports.
There have been 2 attacks using corrosive substances in London over the past 24 hours, folding into statistics which have earned this city the dubious title of the acid attack capital of the world.
In your eyes.
That's nearly 400 attacks here since the start of the year, a crime trend increasingly associated with parts of East London and carried out by young men or boys, often trying to steal mopeds or scooters, targeting delivery people. Scotland Yard says they've arrested a 14-year-old connected to one of last night's attacks on a man delivering pizza after he parked his scooter.
Where our victim, who was very brave, decided to fight back and wouldn't hand over the key.
Local residents tried to help the man, but police say his injuries are life-threatening.
It's likely that he would have lost the sight of both of his eyes. He has inhaled some of the noxious substance, which would appear to be causing a negative reaction in his windpipe, and as a result, he has been put into an induced coma.
The increase has been so alarming here that the British government is preparing to ban the sale of corrosive products to anyone under the age of 18. They're also planning to toughen up laws of possession, so possession of corrosive substances, trying to make them equivalent to the laws in place that exist for carrying knives. Most products used in these attacks can be purchased in your local hardware store. Ammonia and sulfuric acid found in cleaning products. But some critics say knife crime is also on the rise, and that cutbacks to social programs keeping kids off the streets in disaffected areas shouldn't be overlooked as one contributing factor to the problem. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
The former U.S. soldier who abandoned his post in Afghanistan only to be captured by the Taliban received a dishonorable discharge today. But Bowe Bergdahl avoided prison time for desertion. Bergdahl was held by the Taliban for 5 years. He was released in 2014 in a controversial exchange for 5 detainees in Guantanamo. U.S. President Trump tweeted that today's judgment was a complete disgrace. The Red Cross is apologizing after losing over $5 million of Ebola aid money to fraud. Auditors found salaries paid to non-existent employees, overpriced supplies, and cash siphoned off by staff. The organization says it now has more stringent rules in place, and there will be consequences for staff involved. The Holy Grail, an art world miracle. That's how auctioneers are describing an extremely rare Leonardo da Vinci masterpiece. It's about to go up for sale in New York, and as Stephen D'Souza reports tonight, the painting's path to the auction block has taken many twists and turns.
It's been called one of the greatest art discoveries of the 21st century, a piece thought lost to history, one of just a handful of surviving works by one of the great masters.
Where do I start? It's just an extraordinary event to be able to handle the Holy Grail of all masters.
It's called Salvator Mundi, Savior of the World. With eyes that hint at a greater mystery, scholars say it has all the hallmarks of Leonardo da Vinci's hand. It's believed he painted it around the year 1500, about the time he worked on The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa.
His main occupation wasn't only painting. Painting was something he did to the perfections as he did everything else. But that's why there are so few works by him.
In fact, according to Christie's, this is one of just 16 paintings by Da Vinci known to exist, and was the last one in private hands. The painting has an incredible backstory to the point where it had been lost for more than 100 years, and at one point it was sold at auction for just £45. Overpainting and bad restoration jobs had masked the work's true origin. It was bought in 2005 for around $10,000, and that's when the layers were peeled away, revealing the masterpiece beneath. It's since been sold twice and the subject of a lawsuit.
It's only after subsequent removal of the overpaint that the genius became apparent again.
After 500 years, the piece is showing its age, but it's still expected to fetch more than $100 million. It's also generating a lot of buzz as people rush to catch a glimpse, hoping this isn't their last chance.
It's like actually just breathtaking. You gotta just like appreciate it honestly and come see it.
It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to see this piece. I mean, who knows where it'll end up from here.
The hope is it won't disappear again, and that whomever buys it will loan it to a gallery or museum, so Da Vinci's work will remain on display for all to see. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Straight ahead, Bowe Bergdahl answers your questions about climate change.
By the time it finally dissipated itself, Hurricane Hazel had screamed and hacked its way from Haiti to James Bay in a path of death and destruction 200 miles wide. Drownings, falling trees, crushed homes, and washed-out bridges accounted for more than 100 deaths, one-third of them in Ontario alone. So far, 30 bodies have been recovered in the Toronto area. Some of them are as yet unidentified. Complete casualty figures won't be available for several days, but latest reports indicate the final death count in Ontario may exceed 60. 24 hours after the hurricane and floods had passed, some 300 people were still missing. Countless thousands are homeless. Camera crews from CBC Television News worked through the night to bring you this exclusive eyewitness account of Hurricane Hazel. With rainfall reaching almost 7 inches in places, some rivers ran as much as 16 feet above their normal level. When dawn breaks, planes take to the air to survey damage. The sight that greets them resembles a lake, its surface deceivingly quiet. The damage doesn't show, but estimates say farmers will count their losses in the millions of dollars. Then the 4-lane bulwark that links Toronto to her western suburbs, the Humber Bridge. It's totally impassable. Toronto's prized traffic bottleneck, the Humber River Bridge, was washed out on its approaches, although the bridge still held. It was luckier than many other bridges in the greater Toronto area. More than a score of them have been washed away. Some of them have completely vanished. More than 40 highways and main roads are underwater. All traffic to and from Toronto was banned by provincial police, pending a survey of the actual damage.
The United States government released a comprehensive report on climate change today. The conclusion, it's extremely likely that human activities have been the dominant cause of global warming since the mid-20th century. It's a stark contrast to the Trump administration's messaging and policy, with U.S. officials set to push fossil fuels at next week's United Nations Climate Conference in Bonn. That's where some terms of the 2015 Paris Agreement will be negotiated. There's been a lot of news around climate change lately, and you had many questions about the science of it. So earlier, we took those questions to our science correspondent, Bowe Bergdahl, for a special climate change edition of Ask Bob. Our knowledge of climate change is still imperfect, but it's a field scientists have been building on for decades. CBC science correspondent has been following closely since the 1970s.
Hi, I'm Bowe Bergdahl. There's a new element involved, one that we introduced, global warming.
Is there a consensus out there that climate change is real?
And bringing us the stories.
So the Earth is getting warmer.
Now he's here to answer the questions you asked. Bob, thank you.
My pleasure.
We always appreciate the opportunity to put our questions to you directly. So I was surprised, and I have to say impressed, that you've been looking at the science of climate change for as long as you have.
Just about 40 years, Heather. Yeah. And what's interesting about this is that when I first started back in the 70s, there was a debate in the scientific community about which way the climate was going to go. Because one side was saying, you know, we're overdue for an ice age. We should be going into another ice age. Because you follow the pattern of up and down, the period of warm is about 10,000 years, and it's been 12,000 years since the last ice age. So they're saying it's going to get cold. But then there was another group saying, yeah, but there's this stuff called greenhouse gases that we're putting into the atmosphere and a phenomenon called global warming. So it's going to go the other way. So at the beginning,
both sides had
both
sort
sides
of equal.
Were almost equal, and it's been really interesting to see how it's turned out since then. All the predictions of those who said it's going to get warmer have been coming true.
Okay, well, hold on to that thought for just a second, because I want to ask, even from the earliest days, though, when you were beginning to investigate this science, did you have a sense that climate change or something related to warming or the climate was going to be the pressing issue of our day?
Well, I knew that it was going to be a big issue, because that was a time, you know, in the 70s when Earth Day was around, and the Environmental and Protection Agency. Rachel Carson had put out Silent Spring. We got the pictures from the moon of the whole Earth, the big blue marble. So we were really looking inwards on the Earth as a whole and realizing, hey, things are changing and we're causing them, and we got to start looking at this, not just climate change, but pollution, food, oceans, extinctions, all kinds of stuff.
Where are we now? Because here we have a brand new U.S. ambassador to Canada, who just the other day, Kelly Craft, said she believes both sides of the science of climate change. And one of our viewers, as we begin with the first of your questions, Albert Couillard, said, are there two sides today? What are both sides?
Well, the perception of both sides is in the public mind. And that's where there appears to be a debate about whether or not it's really happening. In the scientific community, there is no debate.
It's clear.
Clear. On the public side, there's been a very well-organized and well-funded campaign that we now know was funded by an oil company to put doubt in the public mind by saying, well, you know, maybe not, maybe not. On the scientific side, the United Nations went to the scientific community in 1988, and they asked the same question. Is climate change real? Are humans affecting it? And they gathered together the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. They gathered 1,300 scientists from 50 countries, representing every climate part of the Earth, the entire Earth. And they asked them not to do original research. They said, why don't you gather all the research you can find that's already been published, that's already been through the scientific rigor. Gather it all together and tell us what you see. So they did that. Then they gathered this stuff together, they put that out for scientific review, and then they put out a report. And the majority, the overwhelming majority of all of them said, yes, it's true, it's going up, and humans are responsible for some of it. Now, where the debate within science is, what happens now? So you got the optimists that are saying, well, you know, if we do something, it'll only go up this much. And the pessimists saying, we don't do something, boy, it's going to get really bad. But generally, the trend is still up.
Why is what is happening now different from what has happened past?
And that's an excellent question, because the Earth has gone through dramatic changes in the past. When the dinosaurs were here, the Earth was warmer than it is now. And we've had 5 ice ages. So the Earth has gotten cold and warm and cold and warm, and now we're in a warm period. So yes, the Earth's been getting warm for the last 12,000 years. What's the difference? The difference is that in addition to all those cycles that the Earth naturally goes through, long ones that take thousands of years, short ones that only take decades or even just years, the human aspect, what the scientists are seeing, is on top of that. That stuff is the background. That's always been there. What we're seeing is on top of that, there's this acceleration. And it's the rate of change that the scientists are concerned about. We are doing, within decades, what used to take thousands of years to do. So the changes in the past were very, very slow. So now we're pushing it. We have our foot on the accelerator, and we're causing changes that are happening very, very quickly. And this is a problem because nature doesn't have time to adapt to that.
We had just this week from the United Nations, I mean, what I interpret as a pretty dire warning, that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, I want to make sure I get this correct, increased at record speed last year. It's now reached a level not seen for more than 3 million years.
That's correct. And this change that we're seeing now that hasn't been this way in 3 million years has all happened within the last 150 years, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. You see it on the charts. You see when that curve starts to accelerate up, it all happens when we began burning coal, oil, and natural gas. So it fits. So the the solution is obvious. We got to stop putting the emissions in. But even if we stop today, it would still continue up for a while before it would peter off.
Okay, even if we stop today. Victor from Vancouver has a question about that very point. Hasn't humanity passed the point of no return regarding carbon dioxide emissions? Of course, he says, I'm against carbon pollution. But is there still time to make a difference?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. There have been a couple of milestones that the scientists have put out. One of them is 400 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. We're already past that. We passed that last year. We may never go below that. And the other one is the 2-degree rise. And they're saying if we don't go beyond 400 and if we don't go beyond 2 degrees, the warming would level out. And over a long period of time, it would level out, and then maybe it would start to come back down again. But that means stopping all of the industry that we have now, today. And that's not going to happen. So that means that we're going to go up a little higher than 2 degrees. We may even go up to 4 degrees. And just as a context here, going up 4 degrees, the difference in average temperature between the Ice Age and today was 5 degrees. 5 degrees. When you talk climate, people say, gee, that's not much. What's 2 degrees? God, it goes more than that between yesterday and today, between day and night, between winter and summer. What the heck's 2 degrees? And that's the difference between weather and climate. Weather is what happens every day. Climate is an average. It's
okay, wait, that's Tom. Okay. Tom Wilson wanted to know. Tom is reading our mind because Tom wants to know the difference between climate and weather and how one affects the other. So he's speaking exactly to this. What's measly 2 degrees?
I love the way these all flow into each other. So weather is what happens every day. It's what you see when you look out the window. Weather is what you see. Climate is what you get. Climate is what's going to happen because climate is an average of the whole Earth over a long period of time. So you say, okay, what's the average temperature? It's like average sea rise as well. They talk about the sea level going up inches. Gee, the tide's more than that. So it's an average over a long period of time. And to move the average temperature of the Earth up takes a lot of weather. It takes a lot of storms and circulating the air around and shifting climate zones and shifting the water, even shifting the continents. And so that's why a little bit of change in the climate means a lot of change in the weather.
A number of viewers, Bob, are wondering about methane, specifically the warming Arctic and the fact that that is accelerating global warming because of methane being released in the Arctic. So explain where that gas comes from and the effect that it has.
This is a ticking time bomb that really worries me a lot. Methane is another greenhouse gas, and it has the same effect on the atmosphere that carbon dioxide does, but it's 20 times more potent. So
because it absorbs more of the sun's energy, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so it makes it a more.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a really, really potent gas. And there is more methane in the Arctic ice right now in permafrost. This is underground, not glaciers, it's underground. There's more methane there than there is currently carbon in the atmosphere today that's stored. Now, the reason you get methane out of the Arctic is because mixed in with the ice are all the dead animals from the last time it was warm up there. The mastodons, the woolly mammoths, the short-faced bear, the giant sloths, camels, and
they're
grass,
all there.
They're all in there. That's organic matter that's been frozen. So when the ice melts, that stuff rots. That's where you get the methane. It's from rotting organic matter. So that will add to what we're already talking about with all the human carbon emissions. And unfortunately in the Arctic, it's accelerating. The Arctic is warming faster than the rest of the world because it's an ocean covered in ice. And ice reflects sunlight back out into space, so it stays cool because it's white. When the ice melts, you get dark seawater. Seawater absorbs heat, absorbs sunlight and gets warm. So that's why the Arctic's getting warmer, and then that causes the permafrost to melt, releases the methane. So it's called a feedback loop. So I worry about that one a lot.
Well, so does Howard Eakins, who asks something building on this. If the Arctic ice is receding, is it possible that ocean currents could change? And could those currents carry colder water and the associated weather to regions south?
Yeah, this is a concern that's been around for a while. The ocean currents, they're like liquid weather. The middle of the Earth is warm because that's where the sun is. So the equator is warm, and the top and the bottom of the Earth are cold. Heat likes to go towards cold. So the warm water from the tropics wants to go north and south. So we have the Gulf Stream that comes up the east coast of North America. And it's bringing warm water up to the north. When it gets to the north, Cold Arctic water sinks, it's heavier, it sinks, and it flows along the bottom of the ocean back south again. So there's this big conveyor belt of heat and cold moving between the north and the south. But you need a difference in temperature to do that. If the Arctic gets warm, then there isn't as much draw, and they're worried that the Gulf Stream will cut off. So it could disrupt the ocean currents. The ocean currents really drive the weather a lot. And that's why they call it climate change rather than just global warming.
More of your questions for Bob and his answers after the break.
CBC News Magazine. Canadian scientists and their counterparts on the Soviet side of the North Pole have found out that the Arctic ice pack is slowly melting. The ocean is warming up. Its coat of ice is now only about 60% as thick as it was at the turn of the century.
Polar ice will melt, and by the end of the century, this will bring floods to low-lying coastal areas. Inland, there'll be drought, and in other places, an increase in storms. Some crops could be devastated. But looking at the brighter side of things, at least our great-grandchildren should have warmer winters.
Just a sample of the broad spectrum of opinion on the changes taking place in our atmosphere.
Cataclysmic. Not a trivial matter and not one to be taken lightly.
The greenhouse effect will wreak total havoc on the natural world.
All of them are burning fossil fuels. All of them are adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. But if I put in too much carbon dioxide, in effect, what I'm doing is putting a dome over the entire world. Temperature begins to rise because it's being trapped, the greenhouse effect. And we can actually see it here on the thermometer just from these ordinary studio lights.
Compounding the problem has been the systematic depletion of the world's forests. Trees need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. As the number of trees diminish worldwide, more carbon dioxide is left to build up in the atmosphere.
The start of global warming can also mean extreme and erratic weather, and the evidence has been mounting up.
Knowing what we know now, how serious it may get, I don't want to see us looking back saying, oh, we could have done this, but now it's too late.
I think what concerns me most about global warming, I feel like we're just in a little experiment and that we're just not leaving anything for the future generations.
A piece of film was supposed to have been cut to open this year's Festival of Festivals, but the organizers couldn't find any, so an old-fashioned ribbon was used instead.
This evening, the gala premiere belongs to a Canadian film, Ticket to Heaven. A number of limousines have pulled up with well-dressed people. Unfortunately, nobody seems to know who they are.
Despite the problems, after the film, it was party time, and there was everything you'd expect at a showbiz bash. Stars, booze, good-looking women, good-looking men, people dancing to the music of Martha and the Muffins, and more booze.
It's Warren Beatty night at the Festival of Festivals, where the spotlight shines on everyone. The ushers at the theater had their hands full. It was their job to make sure the fans and the stars didn't collide. But when the big black Continental pulled up to the curb, there was no stopping the autograph hounds.
I'm very proud of myself from restraining myself from attempting to wrestle him to the ground, because it's exactly what I wanted to do.
This was opening night, a gala for the North American premiere of Joshua Then and Now. There were Klieg lights and limousines, but there were also some charming down-home touches. The star, James Woods, arrived with his proud parents, who came in from Rhode Island for the event.
Now, the oh-so-cool set have decreed Canada's little festival that could a must. That, of course, is Robin Williams, Claudia Schiffer.
It's the only film festival in the world where you see all of the most important films. You see a whole year come in advance.
As un-Canadian as it is to gloat, movie critic Roger Ebert says go right ahead.
Yeah, it's okay, Canada. It's okay. It's a real big, real good festival.
All right, here's another question, a great one from Catherine. We've talked about ocean water, salt water. Canada, of course, a land of lakes and rivers. So what are the projected impacts of climate change on the freshwater ecosystems of our country?
Canada has more water than anyone. We have about 20% of the world's fresh water is in Canada. It's astounding. So in some areas, as the temperature goes up and we get more droughts and the glaciers melt, rivers are going to dry up. So there's a good chance that in the west, because the glaciers feed rivers like the South Saskatchewan and things like that, they will be getting less water. In terms of the Great Lakes, which is where most of our industry is and where a good part of our population is.
30 million Canadians and Americans in that basin.
It can go either way. It can go either way. The area is predicted to get warmer, so if you have hotter summers, that means more evaporation. So the lakes lose water just from the heat. And if you have shorter winters, that means less snowfall. So in the spring runoff, there isn't as much snow melt to recharge them again. So that means they could go down. On the other hand, it could go in the opposite direction, because if the storms, the hurricanes that are coming across the Atlantic Ocean and hitting the United States, especially the ones that come into Texas, like we saw this year, those storms are getting stronger, which was also predicted. If they get stronger, that means they'll come up the land into Canada and bring more rain into the Great Lakes area. And also, we have to think about water in terms of the free trade agreement with the United States. For sure. Because the U.S. has plans to drain the lakes to feed the hungry Southwest, because they're going to be really feeling droughts down in the desert regions. And can we allow them to do that? How do we deal with that? So the Great Lakes are a jewel. They're the largest freshwater system on the planet. And we really have to take care of them.
Nancy Meade must have been watching the last time the two of us were talking. And Nancy has a question about space. Do you think that missiles, space travel, have any effect on climate?
Well, rockets spend about 2 minutes in the atmosphere when they take off. After that, they're above the atmosphere. So they're not like high-flying airplanes that are putting carbon dioxide out for hours at a time. So no, they don't affect the climate that way. On the other hand, if it wasn't for spacecraft, if it wasn't for those rockets to put satellites up, we wouldn't even know about most of our climate issues. It's thanks to satellites that we spotted the ozone hole over Antarctica. It's thanks to satellites that we get our weather every night. I mean, in your business, right, you always go to the satellite weather. It's satellites that are showing us the shifting ocean currents, El Nino sloshing back and forth across the Pacific, these decadal oscillations that happen in the Arctic. We didn't even know they existed before we had satellites. So I think we should be thanking the space program for our environmental awareness rather than be worried about its effect on the atmosphere.
Okay, maybe not so much aviation, because that has a disproportionate effect, doesn't it? And people are trying to figure out cleaner ways to fly around this world. Lindsay Foti, how is climate change affecting our bodies, the human body, Bob?
The human body is one of the most remarkable adaptations in evolutionary history. One of the reasons Homo sapiens survived is because we are adaptable. We can adapt to climate change. And actually, it was partly climate change that made Neanderthals go extinct 100,000 years ago. They couldn't deal with it, we did. So we're really good at adapting. So I'm not worried about the human body. However, we are causing, not just through climate change, but through habitat destruction and our food and our population, there's 7 billion of us, we are causing the greatest extinction since the extinction of the dinosaurs. That's the scale of extinction. The animals are going extinct at the same rate as the last time a big asteroid hit the Earth. That's serious. So will it affect our bodies? Yeah, I'd like to eat. You know, what about food? What about the fish in the sea? We're affecting insects that are coming north and killing off our crops. We're having to adapt to that because of insecticide resistance. We have diseases coming up. We got antibiotic resistance. We're trying to fight that. So we're being affected indirectly, not directly by the climate change itself. It's all those other things we're doing. We're at the top of the food chain. And if we knock out the bottom of the food chain, we're going to go with it. And the bottom of the food chain is being affected right now in a very serious way.
Great question, Lindsay. Thank you very much. Getting to very close to the end. My goodness, we could have. There's a lot of science to cover. This is we alluded to this, but I think it's probably worth mentioning. Dave Lycan has a question about whether climate change is affecting the whole planet equally.
That's a great question. I like that one because the Earth is not being affected in the same way in all locations. Some areas are going to be experiencing more droughts than other areas. Island countries are feeling sea level rise. The ocean's rising for two reasons. As it gets warmer, which it is, it expands. Anything that gets hot gets bigger. So the ocean's actually inflating itself just by getting warm. Plus, we're seeing all this melting of Antarctica and Greenland. The ice that's on the land is flowing into the sea and rising it up. And they're predicting a meter, maybe 2 meters of rise in the next 100 years. That's a lot. Again, on an average. That's an average. So that means storm surges will be blowing in. We saw New York City destroy part of it inundated a few years ago when a storm came up the coast. We'll have floodings. Florida's going to start feeling it more because it's so low. They're going to feel the sea level rise and the warming down there. And the Arctic is warming quicker than anywhere else on the planet. So yes, it's not even. It's not even. And there are even some areas, like the middle of Antarctica, believe it or not, is actually some years getting colder because there's a polar vortex there and the air actually goes down in the middle and it causes a cooling region. Some deniers say that. You know, the Antarctica is getting colder, not warmer, but it's only in one spot. So it's very, very complicated. And that's why we have to keep watching it. It's not an easy picture. It's not an easy picture. And even the way that the temperature goes up, it doesn't go up evenly. It'll go up sometimes, then it'll level off for a bit. And everybody says, hey, look, it's not warming, it's not warming, it's not warming. Then it goes up again. And then it levels off and it goes up again. So it's a complicated picture. The Earth has its cycles that it's going through. We have our cycles that we're going through. We can't stop what the Earth is doing, but we can control what we're doing and take our foot off that accelerator pedal to give the Earth a chance. The Earth can heal itself if we stop pushing it. And I really believe we can if we take it seriously and stop saying that there's a debate about this. There is no debate. It's real. Let's just get off the pot and do something about it.
That would be a really great closing comment, except I want you to pick up on it. What can we do both as a country and as individuals?
What I'm finding is that the real change for the future to go to clean energy, to have clean, is happening at a community level. It's happening at the grassroots level. It's not happening at the federal level. It takes a long time for big governments to change their minds. And then you get a new government that comes in anyway. But I'm finding that individual towns, communities, and even provinces and states are taking it upon themselves to do this. And they'll do things like, let's have a river cleanup day or a shoreline cleanup day. Let's plant trees. Let's put in more bike lanes in our downtown communities. Let's go back to a village lifestyle where you can walk to things rather than just drive everywhere. And from a politician's point of view, give tax breaks to businesses that are green already so that their price will come down and be competitive. And then educate the public to say, hey, this is a good idea. You know, solar panels aren't as expensive as they used to be. And make your house more efficient when you're renovating it. Put in good, low flush toilets and put in a high efficiency furnace and try to reduce our footprint, because efficiency can take us so far. We're wasting so much right now. We could go so far just by making things more efficient.
Clean technologies as a global industry is already worth $1 trillion.
Yeah, and it's growing faster than the oil industry is, yes. There is hope, Heather.
There is hope? Is that what shall we leave it at? There is hope?
I like to believe that. I like to believe that. I think humans are adaptable, we're smart, and Canada has great intellectual capital. And we have the resources and the research community here that can look into building better batteries for cars and better windmills and better alternative clean energies and how to live in a clean way. It's not a matter of going back to the caves. It's not even a matter of losing jobs. It's moving forward. It's evolving. It's just evolving into the next stage of our technology and the way we're going to live. I believe we can do it.
Thanks for helping us learn about this science for these many decades and tonight. Thank you for your fantastic questions. Always great to speak with you. Thanks, Bob. The National returning just after this. Stay with us.
This is the story of building the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Between Jasper and Red Pass, a start is made. All the latest weapons employed by engineers in modern pipeline construction converge on the theaters of war. The enemy, one by one, toppling to echoing cries of timber. And the steel monsters arrive. To 140 sidings from Edmonton to Vancouver, 5,000 railway flat cars bring their loads of pipes, and then to their individual prearranged spots in the continuous chain. They're linked together by a complicated process that assures 100% accuracy. The pipe is 24 inches in diameter, and every inch of it must be evenly coated, and then checked and rechecked Then a wrapping is added, made from glass, felt, and asbestos, as the men observe their finished product laid to rest. A continuous tube, liquid railway, stretching 718 miles.
The big question is, of course, whether there is life on Mars, and the short answer is that it's not impossible.
No one knows what Mars really looks like, but this week, streaming back from deep space is the best information in history, bringing us nearer the answers concerning the origin of life, whether man is something special or a special freak.
The search for life on Mars is still continuing. Data received from the Viking landers have puzzled NASA scientists, and within the past 2 days, they've been able to confirm that the ice caps of Mars are really frozen water, not carbon dioxide as once believed. So the chances of finding life get better with each passing day.
Its past was hostile and torn by meteors. Its present is cold and barren. A colony here would seem a futile fantasy. But today's dreamers are scientists, and they do their dreaming for NASA.
I think the possibility of Mars as a second home for mankind is very important for our future as a race.
The students are building a prototype Martian colony called Marsville. It's on Earth, but they do understand what it will take to settle on Mars.
The temperature on Mars is a lot colder than on Earth.
And these students understand cooperation is the only way to get to Mars.
I mean, with all of the technology they have now, we could have somebody go up pretty soon.
They've come from all over the world for this meeting of the International Mars Society. They've got bumper stickers. They've got a Martian flag already picked out.
The one question that always comes up is this: is it worth the many billions more to put people on the surface of the red planet rather than just machines?
The Mars fans here admit the barriers are huge, but they also say we have the capability and the money to get to Mars. All we need now is the will to do it.
To find out more, we need to go out into space, and space research, like politics, is the art of the possible. What we would like to do must be weighed against what we can do.
My God, when I saw the letter, man, this is hell break loose here. You know, this is like 80% increase, and just like that.
Skyrocketing rent and a loss of culture. Two things that are being felt acutely in a number of Los Angeles neighborhoods. They're being gentrified. And as Kim Brunhuber discovered, for longtime residents, all this upscaling has a real downside.
How did it get so far? How did it come to this? A racial firestorm over, of all things, a coffee shop.
I don't know. I don't know.
Look around. The customers of Weird Wave Coffee are artists and hipsters mostly, which is why this place has been dubbed White Wave by many of the shop's Latino neighbors in Boyle Heights. They fear that for this neighborhood, the center of Latino culture in Los Angeles, it could mean the beginning of the end.
We opened, and people protested pretty strongly for a couple of weeks. And then after that kind of died down, a couple of our windows were vandalized.
To understand why people are so angry, one need only visit the historic gateway to Boyle Heights, Mariachi Plaza. You need a mariachi? You come here. But there are fewer and fewer musicians here these days because many can no longer afford the rent.
This is mine. It's a one-bedroom apartment here.
Jose Sanchez has lived in this building for 20 years. These signs are a call to action. A tenant's rent strike after they got a letter from the developer who had recently bought the building.
My God, when I saw the letter, man, this is hell break loose here. You know, this is like 80% increase, and just like that.
With property and rent prices going up across Los Angeles, people with money, most of them white, are being drawn to formerly undesirable minority neighborhoods where residents fear their culture will be erased. About 15 kilometers away, a similar thing is happening in the heart of African-American Los Angeles, Crenshaw.
Many of us who have lived here for many years want to stay here.
In a church hall, hundreds of angry residents have gathered to talk about what seems like good news. A new light rail line, a new mall, a new housing development. But just look at the promotional brochure, they say, clear proof of who developers expect to attract. They fear it will kill the last big African-American business corridor in Southern California, even though the mall developer is black.
They'll change the flavor and tenor of the neighborhood, and the diversity will slowly turn into essentially a white community.
That's the conundrum at the ugly intersection of race and economics. These historic minority communities want development, but that's the very thing that will attract outsiders. And experts say even measures like rent control will do very little to change that.
A little bit like the guy putting his thumb in the dike when a sort of flood of capital is coming in the way toward these neighborhoods.
The storm is coming, and you're going to be out of your houses or your apartments.
So Sanchez practices his speech for the other tenants.
They buying everything. They see only money and gold.
First, the mariachis will disappear, and then
1, 2, 3, and you'll be gone.
Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Los Angeles.
When we come back, a quick recap of some of our top stories. But first, let's check the business numbers for today. The TSX edged up slightly. The dollar increased 0.3 cents. In New York, the Dow gained nearly 23 points, and the price of oil rose $1.10 a barrel.
You can't just sit back and play with your own little world. There are other worlds out there, lots of them, and you can't just ignore them or brush them aside. You see, the world you know is really made up of lots of other worlds, and all of them have their own problems, which, in fact, become your problems. And worlds aren't made up simply of problems. Good things happen, exciting things, and they all affect you. The thing is to understand what's happening. And to understand, you have to have a complete and comprehensive view of matters. And where to get this information? It's easy. The national news, nightly, on CBC Television. So welcome other worlds into your life. It's almost fun. The national news.
5 nights a week in the national newsroom of CBC Television, the stories come in from all parts of the world to be interpreted and prepared for use on The National. The facts are checked and the backgrounds gathered. On-the-spot reports are collected. Then the films and the tapes are evaluated and edited, readied for the air. CBC's correspondents in all corners of the world report and interpret the news. Wherever things are happening, you'll get the complete information right here on CBC Television.
I'm Warren Davis. Those are just some of the things that go into The National. Join me.
From here, each day at 1 o'clock, Canada is given the exact time. 60 Canadian radio stations relay the signal to the nation.
The CBC brings you the Dominion Observatory official time signal. The beginning of the long dash, which follows 10 seconds of silence, will indicate exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Eastern Daylight Time.
Before we go tonight, another look at some of our top stories. Governor General Julie Payette is being criticized for comments at a recent science conference. She raised the issue of creationism in a way some say was derisive. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer among them. The Prime Minister says he defends Payette's commitment to science. And Canada's labour market has expanded for an 11th straight month. The economy added 35,000 new jobs in October. That's more than twice as many as analysts expected. That's the National for this Friday night. For news at any hour, you can always go to cbcnews.ca. I'm Heather Hiscox. Thanks for watching.